You are in for a treat. We have a special guest with us today, somebody that's not typically from the USANA family, not an associate, which is what we've had up to this point. We have a co-author of the best-selling book, Go for No. It's Andrea Waltz. Now, Andrea has been doing this for over 2 decades. The book, Go for No, you've probably heard of it before. If you haven't heard of the book, Go for No, you've probably heard that phrase. But it reached #1 on Amazon's sales and selling list in 2010, has remained in the top 50 for the last 13 years. They've sold over 500,000 copies. It's an amazing book, and it's a really interesting concept that we talk about in this podcast. So really the podcast is overcoming fears of rejection, how you can find ways to be able to get over that and to find success for yourself. So take a listen. It's a real treat. We appreciate Andrea taking her time and enjoying.
Although this particular podcast may not have any claims, we do need to read a couple disclaimers so that we can put it on all the podcasts and that we will be covered. So first of all, for product statements, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. And for earnings and lifestyle. The earnings and lifestyle portrayed are not typical. Earnings are calculated on a sales to consumers. No sales or commissions are guaranteed. Success results only from your diligent efforts. For typical earnings, see the average annual earnings chart at www.usanincome.com.
Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today.
It is great to be with you, Nate. I am excited to be here.
Yeah. I appreciate your time. I know you have a lot of other things going on. Appreciate you being here to help the USANA family. I know this is an area where we really need some guidance, and you are an expert in this field. So again, thank you for your time. I think most people have probably heard Go for No, as we mentioned in the introduction. But I'm just curious, so what was it that kind of brought you to the point where you co-authored this book, where you have this whole program? Like, if you just want to give us some background to this Go for No, that'd be great.
Yeah, a lot of people hear the phrase Go for No, and they don't realize it's even a book. And we did write it 20 years ago now, so I feel a little bit like a dinosaur. It's been around for a long time. The book is a short 80-page fable about a guy who wakes up one morning in a house that belongs to a wildly successful future version of him. And it proceeds to try to figure out, along with the other version of him, 10 years in the future, how this other version became so successful. What does this other him know? And if you can imagine what it would be like to meet yourself 10 years in the future, and you found out that you were really successful, wouldn't you want to know how you did it, right? Like, what's the secret sauce? And so that was the premise of the book. We wrote it because we were doing, Richard, my husband and I, our husband, wife, business partners, we launched our company, and we knew that the best way to get speaking engagements and to get hired for our training programs was to have this book. And so that's why we wrote it. And the book kind of took off, and it's become a little bit of a cult classic. But in addition to that, we also train on the Go for No ideas, and we've been doing this now, like I said, for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I think I didn't even realize when I first started using that term, I didn't realize there was a whole program or a book behind it. It was just, like you said, it kind of became part of the culture almost of, you just go for no's. And I know some people who maybe this is the first time they're hearing this phrase or first time understanding that there's something behind just that term Go for No. Maybe they might think it sounds a little bit negative. So like, how can we think of, instead of like thinking this going for no, that's a kind of a negative concept. So how can we think of that as like a positive?
It does sound really negative. I mean, who wants to go for no, right? Everybody wants to go for yes. And ultimately we are going for yes. And that's why the subtitle of the book is so important, which is yes is the destination, no is how you get there. And so the whole premise behind what Go for No means really just comes down to having the courage to ask and to be willing to face no in pursuit of your goals and dreams, as opposed to saying, well, I want to get yeses, but I'm not willing to hear no. I want the success, but I'm not willing to fail. And so what we discovered, kind of the secret that gets revealed in the book, I'll give it away, is that in order to be more successful, you have to be willing to fail more often. If you want to hear more yeses in your business, in your life, you're going to need to hear more no's. And when you look at the people on the stage, every year who are winning the awards and going on trips and seem to be doing amazingly well in their business, they don't shy away from hearing the word no. They use the go for no philosophy, whether they call it that or not. They use the philosophy and they understand that they need to talk about their business, talk about the products, ask people, go questions that elicit a decision to help people decide if they want to buy, try the product, join the business. And so, so to your point about the negativity, it is negative in that, a big part of, I think, personal growth and personal development is mindset. And we've all been taught to be positive, to think positive. And so if somebody comes along and says, go for no, you think, well, I don't want to think negatively. I don't want to assume that somebody is going to tell me no. I don't want to go into an interaction, believing that I'm going to fail. And so the distinction is really interesting. It's not that you go into any interaction, or even if you're posting something on social media, you're not hoping, wishing, praying for a no. You're not hoping for failure. What you're doing is you're saying, I know that that when I put something out there, I know when I have the courage to ask, it could be a no. And so it's not so much expectant. You're not expecting that it happens, but you are accepting that it happens. You accept it as part of the process, as part of the journey. And that's what we've found that top performers have, is they accept no as part of the process, and they've learned to work with it both on the emotional side of developing the resilience and the skill of not taking it personally. And also they've developed the skill of, how do you handle it? What do you say in that moment? What do you think to yourself in that moment? What do you do to take the next step with that person? Is it the end, or should you keep going? And so we like to say that we take a negative reality, that rejection is out there and there's no sugarcoating it. It makes me a little crazy when I hear people say, like, there's no such thing as rejection. No, that's actually not true. There is, if you are an entrepreneur, there is rejection and you will get rejected. That's the reality. But let's take that reality and turn it into a positive. So ultimately, I like to say that go for no is positive.
That's good. Yeah. You're not going to go into an interaction hoping for the no, like you said, but it is part of the process. And I like that, not having the expectation there'll be a no, but accepting that there will be no's. I like that. I think one thing that people do as well, and it kind of changes the mindset, is they kind of gamify as well, where, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to get no's. So let's see how many no's I can get, because eventually I'm going to get a yes. And I think that's another way that I've heard this go for no term used as well.
Absolutely. Gamifying is a fun way to implement go for no.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so we have the go for no concept. I like the book idea too, because I'd be curious to know, 10 years from now, where am I at? And if I am successful, what were the steps that I took? Because I'd want to also be able to help other people know what those steps are, right? So with that idea in mind, so we have a wide variety of people who are probably listening to this podcast. We have people who are new, people who are re-engaged, people who are maybe engaged, trying to find that momentum. So let's just say that at some point, everybody's getting started. What advice would you have for people who maybe are getting started in this business, or who are maybe slower to get started? They're not seeing the success that they want, or maybe they've restarted a few times and they're in that cycle again to restart. What advice would you give for those people?
Yeah. So, and this really goes to implementation, I think, of the go for no mindset. And one of the foundations of it really has to do with how you define success and failure. So I would encourage everyone to change how they view success and failure in their business and in their life. And this is something that we talk about in the book. We have this model in the book. And it sounds on the surface so cliche, like, oh, failure, way to success. Yeah. But this is really important, because we have all been taught and trained from a young age to avoid failure and avoid rejection. And actually, avoiding rejection is hardwired in our DNA. We don't want to be rejected. It's totally normal and natural. And so we want to avoid those things. Simultaneously, we've been taught to seek success, go for the yeses, right? And so we're in the middle. Failure, rejection, hearing no is on one side, success and the yeses and everything that we want is on the other side of us. Really, the model needs to be reversed. We are on one end. Failure, rejection, hearing the word no is in the middle, and the success and the yeses that we're seeking are on the other side of it. It's really something that we move through. So when people are, if they're getting re-engaged in their business or even just starting, I think recognizing and embracing that model of you don't need to be perfect. You're going to have some failures along the way. You're going to have some rejections. You may post something on social media and it may be an implicit rejection, meaning nobody says anything, nobody comments, nobody likes it, and you think, what am I doing here? Is this working? Is this worth it? You reach out to people, nobody responds. And so we take all of those things and we use those as reasons, as evidence of why it's not working, except for the fact that those failures and rejections don't mean that you're going in the wrong direction. It's kind of like getting on the freeway, seeing a sign that says failure, rejection, straight ahead, and you think, oh, I'm going the wrong way. Better turn right around, head back the other direction. No, you need to keep going. And so as you get more engaged in your business, as you start, the idea isn't to shy away from these things. And this is the tricky part of go for no. And I'll just warn people right now that might freak them out. You want to intentionally increase your activity. You want to intentionally go for those things. Post a little bit more. Do what feels a little more risky than safe. Reach out to a couple people that you maybe wouldn't have. Go talk to your neighbor who you convinced yourself 2 years ago you would never speak to them about your business. No, do it. That is what go for no means. It means selling courageously. It means caring more about the product and service and opportunity that you have than you do about hearing the word no. And so when you're starting out, having that mental model of failure and success, again, as simple as it is profound because it keeps you going and keeps you staying on track to keep going.
Yeah, I really like that. I don't think I've ever heard it where we're in the middle, usually failure and success on one side, success on one side and failure on the other. It's part of the path. That's and right. That makes sense. An analogy, like you use the freeway analogy. I've heard stepping, like when babies learn to walk, they're falling all the time and they're failing, and eventually they get to the point where they understand, they just put their foot out. So as we're walking, really, we're perpetually almost failing, but we put our foot out and we make that step. And then we start to fall and we catch ourselves. And so we learn that process. And that's something that it just popped into my head as you were talking about failing your way to success. It's like, yeah, we learn to walk and maybe we fall down a few times at first and then we start to get the hang of it and we're catching ourselves and we still trip, we still fall, we still pick ourselves back up, and we'll keep doing that for the rest of our lives, most likely. And you kind of mentioned this as well, and maybe it's just better to highlight it, but implementing go for no in someone's business. Like you talked about kind of the concept of it, but maybe what are like the top 3 ways that you could recommend somebody to implement this go for no concept into their business?
Right. So straight off the bat, easy way to implement is first create a no awareness. So this requires a little bit of honesty, a little bit of open-mindedness. Look at what you're doing in terms of activity and really ask yourself, do you hear no ever? Are you getting no's, or are you playing it so safe that you get a yes here or there or a bunch of no responses and then you stop, you slow down? So first create that awareness and kind of see where you are. The second step, and this is the fun part, and this is the gamification as you kind of referenced, and this is where you can set a goal for the number of no's you want to hear. And it doesn't need to be something crazy. I hear people will set, 100 goal for 100 no's in a week or a month. And if you're able to do that kind of activity, great. But if you're not, I propose that you just say, what if I could get one no a day? What if you got one no a day for the whole year? How many of the, and again, this is not expectation. This is doing the activities and the behaviors necessary to be successful, understanding that when you make those courageous asks, some of them are yeses. And so if you just said, I'm going to try to hear one no a day, how many of them would end up being yeses over the course of a year? And so it doesn't have to be some crazy big goal, but you can also increase. So that's step number 2. And then step number 3 of the implementation is to make sure that you reward and celebrate your failures as much as your success. So if you do get a no, if you get somebody who says, no, I'm not interested, or don't contact me again about this, or whatever. And believe me, you're not alone in this. I get no's too, all the time. So nobody is immune, okay? When you get those no's, reward yourself, congratulate yourself, celebrate the fact that you were in action and did some activity instead of beating yourself up and using that as evidence of why it doesn't work or why you're not cut out for whatever. And if you implement those 3 things, that awareness, that setting of that no goal, that executing it, and that celebrating it, it's amazing how quickly things can change for you. And that's really how you build your confidence. One of my favorite quotes is from Jack Canfield, and we interviewed him, this is years ago, for our Go for No documentary movie that we made. And Nate, this goes back like before iPhones. I mean, so this is really old. We had like the flip cameras and everything, but it was really cool. I met Jack Canfield because he's one of my heroes. He wrote a book called The Success Principles and the Aladdin Factor, and I got to interview him, and we were talking about Go for No. He completely believes in the Go for No philosophy about the power of asking, and he said, self-confidence is the successfully survived risk. So when you put yourself out there and you go for no and you survive it, you see, okay, I survived it. It's just not that big a deal. I'm making it a little bit bigger deal in my head. That is how your confidence is built. It's never built by not taking action, by just sitting and waiting and hoping that you feel somehow inspired, somehow, motivated. It's built through taking action.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, that's an amazing quote. And like you said, and that reminds me kind of what you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation of, like, you see the people who are having success on stage. I mean, people who are getting the awards, people who are on TV because of their great accomplishments, and you don't know the backstory. You don't know how many no's they got to be able to get to that point. You only see the success. And so if we have that mindset of, I'm going to get some rejection, I'm going to hear some no's, but if I, instead of shy away, if I start pushing through that, then I also can have that success. And I like how you mentioned it also shapes our confidence too, and knowing that we can do it instead of beating ourselves up and saying, well, it wasn't for me, or I guess I just didn't work for me this time, or whatever that negative mindset is. So you mentioned Jack Canfield, a couple of his things. Where can people learn more about Go for No? Where can they find you? You mentioned your documentary as well. So give us a little bit more details. How can people find more information about this?
So we're pretty well branded. We've been around for a long time. So I'm on social media at Go for No on all the social media platforms. But if people go to goforno.com, they can take a 20-question assessment, which is kind of fun. It measures your mindset around failure, success, rejection. So people can get an idea of where they are, in terms of their mindset. And then the other thing is, you can grab the book Go for No on Amazon if you're a reader, and it's on all the audio platforms as well. And the book is kind of a great place to start because it gives you that foundation. And then we've got an online course, and we're always developing new things. Right now, I'm finishing up a Go for No 21-day challenge for people. We've got workbooks on Amazon as well. But I think that's the best way to get started. Take the quiz, get the book, and you're on your way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I do know you have so many things. Like you said, you're working on continuously providing new things for this Go for No concept and for this brand that you've built. Thank you for spending time with us. And before I let you go, though, are there any last words of advice before we part and end this podcast?
Yes, the skill of asking is a life philosophy. And that's really what you're building, is the skill of asking. It's in your business, it's in your life. And so if you see an opportunity, whether you're out somewhere and you walk into a restaurant and they have like the adorable table in the front with the little flower on it in the front window, and then they put you back in the water station and the horrible table, just ask. The worst that you can get is a no. The best you can get is an awesome table at the front of the restaurant. So practice this skill.
Oh, I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea. Again, appreciate your time, appreciate your willingness to share with us and the USANA family some of this knowledge. And we'll put the links and everything in our show notes so that people can access it really easily from listening to this podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks.